Welcome to my YouTube channel. This is a series of videos on Excel functions, and this video specifically talks about the Vlookup function in Excel. There are going to be some more videos on Vlookup. In this video, we are going to discuss all these things: the definition, how to use parameters to be passed, example, limitation, references, exact and approximate match, default search type. So let's get started. Okay, so the definition of VLOOKUP, as you can see on screen, is it's a function to search and value in an array or table of data vertically and fetch value from one of the columns in the array corresponding to the looked up value. Okay, so the array or table that we are going to talk about, let's say this is the table in which we are going to look up the values from this column. Okay, so we are going to look up employee ID in this column of this table and fetch one of the information, either name, last name, email ID, department. So how to do that? Equal to VLOOKUP. Now Excel shows you the function VLOOKUP. Look at the definition. Looks for a value in the leftmost column of a table and then returns a value in the same row. So looks for a value in the leftmost column of the table. So whatever table you are going to search, it's going to look up this value in the first column of your selected table, then returns a value in the same row. So wherever it finds this 345, it will return a value from the same row from one of the column that you specify. So it could be name, last name, email ID, department. By default, the table must be sorted in an ascending order. Okay, so let's start. Let's select this VLOOKUP function. As soon as I select this, it shows me four parameters to be passed. First one is the lookup value. So which value are you looking up? In this case, we are looking up this employee ID. So I'll select this, comma, table array. Table array is the table in which you are going to search. So this is the table. So I select the entire table, okay, comma, column index number. Okay, sorry, this table is not selected fully. So I'll select again. Okay, so here the table with all the columns, comma, column index number. This is the location of the column from where you want to fetch the information. So I want to fetch the email ID for this employee ID. Okay, I have selected this table. What is the location of email ID column? This is first 1, 2, 3, and 4. So I'll write on 4, comma. The fourth parameter is the specification of whether it's an exact match or an approximate match. So in exact match, it exactly looks up for this value. If it doesn't find it, it will throw an error. In approximate match, it first of all, the approximate match only works on numbers. In this case, we do have numbers which we are looking up and not on string or text. Secondly, these numbers have to be arranged in ascending order here in this table in which we are looking. So, but I'll tell you about the approximate match later. For now, we'll start with the exact match. For exact match, for selecting approximate or exact, either you can select from here or you can write 0 and 1. 0 is for false or exact match, 1 is for true approximate match. So I'll say 0 here. So for 345, the email ID is this, and so we are getting the correct value. Okay, now I'll copy paste this in the remaining cells. Okay, so see, in the formula only the looked up cells number, which is C7, C8, C9, changes because that's what the location of these cells is. Okay, so 345 was in C5, C7, 456 in C8. So, and let's quickly verify if these values are correct. So this is correct. 112 is not in this table, so it fetched an error. NA 567 value is correct. 123 value is correct. 234 value is correct. Okay. So this is the basic exact match uh, VLOOKUP using exact match. I'm going to show you some variations here. Okay, so let's say this is email ID column. Again, email ID, let's say email ID 1. Now you see here, uh, when I copied this formula here, only the first parameter changes its value, all remaining remains constant. That's because I have selected the entire table here. Now what happens if I don't select the entire table on just the first four columns? Let's see. Equal to, we look up, uh, so let's select only four columns out of the five columns this time. Then again the email ID is in the fourth column, so 4 and 0 for exact match. Okay, and then we'll copy this formula across all other cells. So again, as you can see, exactly the same result. And when I copied the formula, as you can see, these are the values that I passed. When I copied this across all other cells, have a look at this section, what changes. So again, it's only the first parameter that is changing, and that should change because we want these values to be picked up and not a fixed value. Okay, now again, let's see another variation of this. What happens if I do not select the full columns? Instead, I select, let's say, first four columns. Let's say the last two records. I know that the last two records are incorrect, and they will fetch me wrong values. So I'll just search in first four column for first four rows. So let's see what happens then. Okay, I'll select the first four rows and let's say all the columns. Then fourth column is email ID, and then 0 for exact match. Okay, now let's see the formula here. Now in these two searches, the table name, when I selected the table, it has taken an absolute reference, and as you can see, it says table 1, whether all columns or the first four columns. Here you see it doesn't show any table name, it shows the range. So the range was C15, which is this, to G19, which is this. Yeah. Now what happens if I copy this across to remaining cells? Sorry, uh, slightly different results, right? Here you see. So what happens when I copied this formula? What happens? Not only it changes the first parameter, it also changes the range. So instead of C15 G19, it says C16 to 20. C16 to 20 means this, and the next one it says C17 to G21. G21. So this should not happen. The table in which we are searching, it should remain constant. Otherwise, um, you might not get correct data, because what's happening here? It's not finding 1, 2, 3. Why? Because for 1, 2, 3, the range has become C19 to G23, which is C19 to G23. In this, you will not find 1, 2, 3, right? That's why the range has to be constant. So what to do in this case? This is what uh, these are moving references, because the reference table is moving, right? You have to make it absolute reference. How to do that? Okay, you have to uh, add a dollar symbol before the character and the number, both. Okay. In this case, just you can just do the dollar symbol on the number rather than character, and it will still work fine. I'll show you how. Okay. Now if I copy this formula, okay, yeah, it is working fine. You know why? Because 567 is below this range of uh, rows. That's why it's not fetching. Otherwise, if you see the formula isn't moving, right? It's not moving. The this range is not moving. Okay, just like the first two searches, only the this column, this cell is moving. This cell number is moving. C7, C8, C9, C10, 11, 12. But you're getting a different result because uh, the range doesn't include the entire table. Okay, you're not getting the value for this 5, 6, 7 because I have selected C15 to 19. C15 to 19 is this. It doesn't include 5, 6, 7. Okay, so this is called absolute reference when we add dollar symbol before uh, before the row or column. C is the column, 15 is the row. Okay. So whenever we add a dollar before anything, it doesn't change. Okay. Now what happens if I now what happens if I copy this formula across here? Earlier I was copying it in the same column but different rows, right? Now what if I change the column? I copy this formula here. What happens? I receive NA. That's because if you see the formula here was C15 to 19, but now I'm moving the column, so the column in the range also changes from CD, from CG it becomes DH. So D15 to H19 is what? D15 to H19. Okay, this is the range. Now, since this employee ID column is not included in this range, it will never find these employee IDs in this range. Okay, so what's happening? Earlier I fixed the row number, so and I was moving in the same column. That's why the column C and G were not moving. And I fixed the row number, so they were not, also not moving. But when I moved the column, okay, move the column means now I'm copying the formula from this column to this column. So the column in the array also moved. So when I am copying here to there in the another column, I have to make the column numbers or names also absolute. So I'll add dollar here as well. Sorry. Now it has become totally absolute. So this will remain the same. And if I copy this formula across here, again it will fetch me the correct value. Sorry. One more thing one more change we have to make. As you can see, when I copied it across here, the first parameter changed from C to D, D7. So it's looking D7 in this table, in this column. So that is wrong. We want we still want to look at the first C column, right? So I have to make this one C as well, uh, absolute reference, but I don't want 7 to be absolute because when I move down, it should change. So again, I'll copy this. If I copy here, it will remain the same. If I copy this across, again, it will fetch the correct value. And now I'll copy this here. The results in this two is exactly the same. So these are absolute references. Okay. Okay. Till now we were looking at the exact match. I was passing the fourth parameter as 0 in all these formulas. Now let's see how approximate match works. Okay. So let's say I've created this emp ID column with these values 4, 5, 6, 5, 6, 7, 2. Okay. And again, I'm going to look up these values in that column. but this time I'll use the approximate match. So equal to Vlookup selected. The value I'm going to look up is again employee ID. Um, the table in which I'm going to look up again, let's select the entire table. Okay. The parameter I want to fetch, the value I want to fetch is email ID, which is fourth in this table, fourth column, fourth. At this time, instead of 0, I'll select 1, which is approximate match. Let's see what values does it fetch. And now I'll copy this formula across across these cells. Let's see what I fetch. So 345, I receive the correct outcome, which is peterlin@yahoo.com. 356, there is no 356 here, but still it's fetching some value, which is peterlin@yahoo.com. 456, uh, it is fetching the correct value. 567, correct value. 112, it's not fetching any value. Let's say I write another random number, which is 444, and copy this formula. Okay. Still fetching Peter Lin. Okay. Let's say instead of 444, I say 500 here. Oliver Harris. Okay. So how does it work? So as we discussed earlier, in an exact match, it looks for the exact value. If it doesn't find, it throws an error. Not in this case. It looks how approximate match works is, first of all, as I told you earlier, it only works on numbers, not on strings. On string, it will just fetch random values. Okay. And also the table in which we are looking, in that table, the number should be arranged in ascending order, which are in this case arranged in ascending order. So how does it work? So the number I am searching, it looks for that number in this table in increasing order. Okay. Until it finds the same number. If it finds the same number, it will fetch the correct value, which is what is happening in this case. But if that number is not in this table, then it will still keep searching. And when it comes across a value which is bigger than this number, it will fetch the value corresponding to the previous value. Okay. So when I am looking up 356 in this column, so it starts with 1, 2, 3, 2, 3, 4, 3, 4, 5, and when it comes across a number bigger than 356, which is 456, it fetches the value corresponding to the previous value, which is 345. So the value corresponding to 345 Peter Lin, again same. Now 456, it is there. So when it finds exact match, it will fetch the correct value, again 567 correct value. 112, why? Before coming to 112, let's look at 500. Again the same formula as for 356. It starts from here, goes till here. Which value is bigger than 500? This one. So it will fetch the previous one, which is Olive Harris. Okay. Now why it doesn't fetch anything for 112? That's because uh, in the first iteration itself, it encounters 123, which is bigger than 112. So there is nothing before 123. Okay. That's why it doesn't fetch anything. So this is how basic approximate match works. I'm going to make videos on how and when approximate matches are used. So there are some useful cases for approximate matches as well. I'm going to cover that in a different video. Now you need to make note of one thing, is that uh, the fourth parameter is not a mandatory parameter. So um, if you leave it empty, by default it will take approximate match. So let's see. What happens if I do not select the fourth parameter? This is the table range. I want to fetch email IDs of 4. I don't enter the fourth parameter. What happens if I copy this formula? So as you can see, both these outcomes are exactly the same, and uh, they are this outcome is corresponding to the approximate match which we did earlier, and I have not provided any fourth parameter here, first, second, and third only. Here I provided the fourth parameter as one, which is approximate. Both of these work exactly the same, which means that the fourth parameter is not mandatory, and by default this search type is approximate match. So I advise you to always specify the fourth parameter so that you know which type of search has been done, and also uh, so that you do not unintentionally do approximate match which fetches you the wrong results. Okay. Okay, so that's an important thing to note. And now I'm going to talk to you about a limitation of the VLOOKUP. So till now, you must have noticed that the table in which we are looking for, um, the column in which we are looking, the column in which we are looking up these employee IDs, it was the first column in these tables. Okay, and the column from which he wanted to fetch the information, which is email ID, it was to the right of the first column. Okay, the employee ID column. Now, what happens if this employee ID was on the left and not on the right? Okay, so let's try that. I'll move this employee ID from the right of employee ID column to the left. Okay, what happens? All the values here are gone. Okay, uh, because the formula has to be changed now. So let's rewrite the formula once again. Okay, so we look up 345 C7. So now what will be the table range? I want to fetch the email ID. Email ID is here, employee ID is here. So this should be the table range, right? Okay. Now the third parameter, which is the column number, what should I write here? The location of this column is corresponding to the first column in the table. Now the table in which I have selected, the first column is email ID. So, and I want to fetch email ID, but I also want to look up this C7 value in this employee ID column. So let's see what happens if I select uh, one in the column index and do exact match. It will not fetch any value. Why? Because the VLOOKUP always looks up this value in the first column of the table that you select, or the range that you select. So it will still look up for this 345 in this, and it will not find anything. So it will not fetch anything. That's why this is the limitation of VLOOKUP, which means that uh, the column in which you are looking up these values, that should be the first column in your selection of the table or your range. Okay, corresponding to first column, the third parameter, which is the location of the column from where you want to fetch value, has to be passed. That's why VLOOKUP can only look for these values to the right of the column in which you are looking up, not to the left. Okay. Uh, what happens if I pass, let's say, -1? It won't work, because this is how this syntax of VLOOKUP is. So this is the limitation I was talking about, that VLOOKUP can only look up right to the column. Okay. Okay. I'll just quickly change back the settings to how they were earlier. Yeah. Okay. So I think I have covered all the topics that I wanted to, and hopefully this video will be very useful to you. I'll I'll create more videos for VLOOKUPs as well, and other Excel functions as well. So keep watching. Thank you.